We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the water, go back to the water, go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living in the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. Whoa, so is life. Ah, so is life. Whoa, so is life. Ah, so is life. Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? Do you know who I am? Do you know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Oh, so is life. Ah, so is life. Whoa, so is life. Ah, so is life. Whoa, so is life. Ah, so is life. Whoa, so is life. Ah, so is life.
It is so good to see all of you here today. It's a holiday weekend, and I know it's always a little bit of a stretch to get yourself out when the weather is beautiful and there are 1,000 other things to do. Today, of course, is Indigenous Peoples Weekend, and it was Yom Kippur, and last week we talked about this cycle of self-reflection, atonement, and forgiveness, and today seems like a good day for us to consider and to move into that very cycle. Today we're talking specifically about what we lost when this continental culture shifted from indigenous culture to a white European culture. So we're talking about indigenous wisdom, lost wisdom. So let us begin. What an opportunity it is for us to right-size ourselves as the ground moves beneath our feet, as earth, sun, and moon align, as storms drench us, fill our waterways, and dry out again. We are smaller than we think we are, more vulnerable than we want to be, further from the center of the universe than we too often assume. So we gather together like humans have done from the beginning, to wonder, to celebrate, to hold fast to one another as we spin through this vast and mysterious solar system together. Please rise in body or in spirit, and let's sing together our opening hymn, Gather the Spirit. The words will be written in your program.
You may be seated. Can you hear me? Yes? A little bit? It's getting a little louder. Can I have my mic up a little bit? Okay, there we go. Yes, can you hear me now? Good. Our chalice lighting this morning will be first sung, then spoken, then sung. We light this chalice, the flame of our heritage. May it ignite hope in our lives, in the community, and in the world. Please join me in reciting our unison affirmation found in your bulletin. Unto the Church Universal, which is the depository of all ancient wisdom and the school of all modern thought, which recognizes in all prophets a harmony, in all scriptures a unity, and through all dispensations a continuity, which abjures all that separates and divides, and always magnifies humanity and peace, which seeks truth in freedom, justice in love, and individual discipline in social duty, and which shall make of all persons one beloved community. Unto this church and unto all its members, known and unknown throughout the world, we pledge the allegiance of our hands and hearts. We greet each other on Sundays as part of our liturgy. We turn to our neighbors, whether they are strangers or old friends, and we welcome each other to our shared space. It's our way of saying that our spiritual path is communal, relational, that we are in this together. It's not just friendly. It's how we ground ourselves in this space with each other. And if you would like to jump and run and skip while we say good morning, you're welcome to do that too. Please greet your neighbor.
Congregants, please take your seats.
I love the way you all love each other. Now sit down. We are going to sing our children out.
On Friday afternoon, in the hours before sunset and the beginning of Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish year, my partner and I walked to the West Harlem piers on the Hudson River with scraps of bread in our hands. And like we do every year, we participated in the ritual of Tashlich, an important part of the Jewish high holy days that must be done between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. On Rosh Hashanah, it is written, and on Yom Kippur, it is sealed. These days in between the two holidays are known as Teshuvah, a time of returning, a time of repentance. We ripped off pieces of the bread and tossed them in the river, watching them float on the water and slowly dissolve. Beloveds, I am not a crier, but I cried then. My body was on that pier, but my heart was in the mountains of North Carolina and on the coast of Florida. It was in the hospitals of Gaza and the refugee camps of Lebanon. It was in the prisons of this country where incarcerated Unitarian Universalists wait for a letter from their Worthy Now prison ministry pen pals. I don't know what exactly I can say here to hold all of that pain and that grief. I know we are all hurting, all in different ways. I know that our Unitarian Universalist values call us to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I know that our Unitarian Universalist values call us to justice and liberation for all. I do not know all of the answers, but I know that we must be guided by love. Beloveds, return again. As the leaves change and the air chills, remember that we have been here before. We have fallen short, hurt others, ignored the pain and suffering in the world, made mistakes. And we will return again. We will return to our shared values of justice and interdependence, of equity and pluralism, gratitude and transformation, we will return to love. We acknowledge the ways we are complicit in systems of oppression, the way our lives contribute to climate change, to violence and war, settler colonialism and white supremacy. We name the ways that injustice disproportionately impacts those who are already marginalized and oppressed, those who are displaced, those who are abandoned. We recognize our part in the works of repentance and repair, the ways in which we can mend relationships, fight for justice, share in the care of our broken world, spread love through our communities and beyond. We return again. As we share in this sacred moment together, bringing all of our burdens and all of our gifts, all of our wishes and all of our regrets, we return again to each other, knowing that we cannot do this work alone. In the name of all that is holy, Amen.
It can be difficult for those of us with modern sensibilities, accustomed to a post-colonial world, to imagine this continent, before Europeans. The first and most destructive force in the colonial period was disease, and by the time most foreigners began to settle the land of this country, huge percentages of America's population had already died. Before these illnesses took so many people, the cultural diversity, and specifically the urban density of human cultures, would have been astounding to our modern eyes. If I were to find myself shipwrecked at the very southern tip of Florida a few years before European contact, I would have found myself engaging with a diversity of cultures that had been developing and changing for more than 12,000 years. That's 6 times the time from between Jesus to now. That's 6 times as long. On these tropical beaches, I would have first encountered the Calusa peoples, who thrived with ancient hunting and farming technologies that supported dense urban populations that would have looked a lot like today's cities. The Calusa organized themselves with complex systems of government, making use of civic architecture, great plazas and towns, enormous earthen structures for ceremonies and community gatherings. If it was near the 1490s, I would have encountered bean and corn and squash farms supported by canals that crisscrossed the state with complicated systems of both fresh and marine aquaculture. Now let's say I headed north, up towards New York City, let's say. Before leaving Florida, I would have crossed several different language zones and cultures before entering a region occupied by those whom we know as the Apalachee, a community that at one point numbered 50 to 60,000 members. They were considered wealthy in the communities at the time, and Appalachia culture in what we now know of as Florida and Georgia was quite different than its antecedent further north. In the South, they traded complex traditions of leisure, played sports, and played games with balls made of clay. As we moved north, I would have encountered people of the Ais, the Creek, the Mikosuki, the Seminole, the Timucua, the Yamasee peoples. This is before leaving Florida. Heading north, if I continued and traveled inland through the forests, I would have encountered some of the oldest forests in existence and the people who cared for them. I'm speaking of the Shawnee, Powhatan, Waco, Tawakoni, Tonkawa, Karankawa, Kuapau, and Mosopelea. In these forest cultures, I would have encountered matrilineal kinship systems, diverse marriage systems between clans organized into settled villages and towns. Southeastern woodland societies were divided into clans named after the beaver, bear, birds other than raptor, canine, elk, feline, fox, raccoon, and raptor bird. I would likely have experienced intricate coming-of-age rituals that took place for both genders, as well as a place in most societies for those who identify as genders other than male and female, and for which we have no English words. In these societies, mixed clan heritage was the norm, incest being so taboo that marriage within clans was often discouraged. Instead of heading inland, let's say instead I went along the coast and stuck near the beaches. There I would have encountered a federation of communities with shared cultural ancestry, but without the communal collaboration we think of as tribal. We use the word tribe, but when we call these gatherings tribes, it's not a helpful term, because neither the boundaries suggested by a tribe nor the collaboration within tribal community fit the culture of what we now call the lowlands of South Carolina. Here, what we now call the Low Country, I would have encountered the Stalame, Tupa, Mayon, the Hoya, Kusa, the Kiowa, Etiwan, the Stono, Ashapu, the Kombahi, Sewi, Wando, the Sampa, the Wicheal, and the Bohiket. That's just to name a few. As I continued to move north, I would move through and past the sprawling and highly developed Catawba communities, federations of families and clans that drew from cultural influence in the forest as well as from the low country. Structured and boundaried cultures slowly transformed into collaborative networks of Pan-American language groups. I am now entering what modern culture knows as the Cherokee Nation. As one of the largest indigenous cultures still in existence, Cherokee culture and language thrive through the support of their descendants. But before European influence, the Cherokee Nation was more than a unified cultural group, but a vast multilingual confederacy of great diversity, spanning from Georgia up to Tennessee and across to Virginia and Maryland. If I continued north of the Cherokee Nation, I enter the geographical territory from Delaware across through Pennsylvania and up through New York State. This includes New Jersey and Connecticut, and it was known as the Lenape-Hoking, the traditional territory and home of the variety of clans and families who together made up the Confederacy of the Lenape. Adam DePaul, the story keeper of the Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania, calls the name Lenape an anglicized grammatical error that basically means original people. Now, by the time we get to the Confederacy of the Lenape families, I would have encountered highly fashionable groups with heavily structured communal systems and kinship networks. Matrilineal and matriarchal, these Lenape societies were broad and diverse. They included numerous linguistic traditions. I would have found here garments made of woven and dyed deer hair in deep crimson and scarlet colors, as well as plumes of feathers adorning headdresses and breast ornaments for clothing. The Lenape used jewelry to great symbolic meaning, weaving in ornaments of stone, shell, animals' teeth, and claws. Headbands of dyed deer hair were generally women's garments, but they also wore ornate skirts decorated with porcupine quills. These skirts so elaborately laced that when seen from a distance, they reminded the Dutch settlers of fine European lace. The Lenape wore winter cloaks that bore intricate designs made from iridescent body feathers of wild turkeys. More than 90% of the cultural diversity that existed before European settlement has been lost, and yet, despite this, there are currently 574 recognized tribes in the United States. 296 languages were spoken north of Mexico, grouped into more than 29 language families. The varieties of European and Western estimates that account for the total population of this time vary greatly in detail and specificity. By 1650, we know the population was about 5 million people, but estimates suggest that prior to colonization in the 15th century, the population of North America could have been as large as 112 million. I'm talking about 112 million people organized into more than 500 societies with complex social structures, monuments, organized cities, kingdoms, republics, confederacies, even empires. If I were shipwrecked in Florida in 1491 and walked to what is now New York, I would have seen deep traditions and technologies relating to engineering, architecture, mathematics, astronomy, writing and physics, medicine, agriculture, irrigation, geology, mining and metallurgy, sculpture, and even goldsmithing. Here ends our wisdom story.
They paved paradise and put up a parking lot with a big hotel, a boutique, and a swinging hot spot. Don't it always seem to go? You don't know what you've got till it's gone. Don't it always seem to go? But you don't know what you've got till it's gone. They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. Paved paradise, put up a parking lot. They took all the trees, put them in a tree museum. And they charged all the people $1.50 to see them, yeah. Don't it always seem to go? You don't know what you've got till it's gone. Don't it always seem to go? You don't know what you've got till it's gone. They paved paradise and put up a parking lot. Paved paradise and put up a parking lot. Hey, farmer, farmer, put away that DDT, yeah. I don't care about spots on my apples. Leave me the birds and the bees. Don't it always seem to go? You don't know what you got till it's gone. Don't it always seem to go? You don't know what you've got till it's gone. Pay paradise and put up a parking lot. Yeah, they pay paradise and put up a parking lot. Listen, late last night I heard my screen door sway. A big yellow taxi came and took my girl away. Yeah, don't it always seem to go that you don't know what? Don't it always seem to go? You don't know what you got. Don't it always seem to go? Don't know what you got till it. Don't it always seem to go? Don't know what you got till it's gone. And don't it always seem to go? You don't know what you got till it's gone. They pay paradise, put up a parking lot, yeah. They pay paradise, put up a parking lot. Pay paradise, put up a parking lot, yeah. They pay paradise, put up a parking lot.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really hard to follow Darnell, as always. That was beautiful. As most of you know, we don't just do church on Sundays here. Community Church has programming all through the week, and everyone is welcome, including those of you who are online. If you can make it in, that's awesome. Checking our website, joining our mailing list will give you a much more complete picture of what's happening each week, since we only announce a few events on Sundays. This week, Brother Zachary is leading a new Bible study. It will happen on Thursday at 11 a.m. online in our main room. Everyone is welcome. Also on Thursday, our online art community is meeting at 2:30 under the leadership of longtime artist Ellen Mendelbaum. And on Saturday, the Anti-Racism Action Group will meet online at 11 a.m. Now, we're not going to pass a plate today, but if you'd like to make a donation to support our many ministries, there is a plate in the back and a QR code in your program. Thank you.
enter the wild with care, my love, and speak the things you see. Let new names take and root and thrive and grow. And even as you travel far from heather, crag, and river, may you, like the little fisher, set the stream of light with glitter. May you enter now as otter, without falter into water.
Look to the sky with care, my love, and speak the things you see. Let no our names interweave and thrive and grow. And even as you journey on, past dying stars exploding like the gilded one in flight, leave your little gifts of light. And in the dead of night, my darling, find the gleaming eye of starling. Let the little aviator sing your heart to all Creator.
No, wait. It's it. All right. October 12th, 1492. Christopher Columbus arrived in the Bahamas, forever altering global history. For centuries since then, this date has been remembered and celebrated. How wonderful for Europeans to have discovered so much unclaimed land. Today, we know there were somewhere between 75 and 112 million people here, but the lives of the living nations inhabiting this land were deemed irrelevant because they were so different from the lives of the people newly arriving. We talk often about the human rights violations, the genocidal policies, the gobsmacking, unbridled racism, the ongoing and even current injustices those people endured. Every year we use this holiday weekend to remind ourselves of the sinister history from which we have all benefited. Today, instead, I'm thinking more about what we lost, us, Americans. What would our culture be like if instead of conquering, enslaving, and defeating, Europeans partnered, learned, collaborated? What did we lose by killing the cultures, languages, and people who were here? Right here in New York City, the story is often told, sort of laughingly, that the Lenape sold Manhattan for a handful of beads. Like, we got one over on them. We know that the Lenape thought that they were entering a treaty, right? That the beads were just a gift from the newcomers to share this space. They had no sense at all of selling and owning land. That was not in their framework. The Dutch, though, understood selling and buying, and they had no intention of sharing. And once that trade was made, they were constantly frustrated by the Lenape's continued presence. Once you sell a house, you can't keep living in it. Right there, we lost an opportunity to learn this deep and ancient wisdom. No one owns the land. The land lives independently. We are in reciprocal relationship with the land. When new people arrive, we are in reciprocal relationship with them too, as partners on the land. For a church so deeply embedded in New York City real estate, I can't help but stare at all we lost by not learning the lesson the Lenape were offering with that bag of beads. The Lenape could teach us about partnership and the absurdity of ownership, and about being people rooted in place. In most Indigenous languages, there are far more verbs than nouns. In English, about 70% of our words describe people, places, and things. Indigenous languages approach this naming differently. They separate that which is living from that which is inanimate. Robin Wall Kimmerer tells the story of trying to learn her language of origin, Potawatomi. She learns the nouns pretty easily, but she really can't understand the verbs. There are too many of them, they don't make any sense. So this is her story. She writes, I remember paging through the dictionary, trying to decipher the titles, but the spellings didn't always match, and there are too many variations on a single word, and I was feeling like this was just way too hard. The threads in my brain knotted, and the harder I tried, the tighter they became. Pages blurred and my eyes settled on a word, a verb, of course, to be a Saturday. Ugh. I threw down the book. Since when is Saturday a verb? Everyone knows it's a noun. I grabbed the dictionary and flipped more pages, and all kinds of things seemed to be verbs. To be a hill, to be red, to be a long sandy stretch of beach. And then my finger rested on Wikawagama, to be a bay. It's ridiculous, I ranted in my head. There's no reason to make this so complicated. It's no wonder no one speaks this. A cumbersome language, impossible to learn, and more than that, it's all wrong. A bay is most definitely a person, place, or thing. It's a noun, not a verb. I was ready to give up. And then I swear I heard the zap of synapses firing, An electric current sizzled down my arm, through my finger, and practically scorched the page where that one word lay. In that moment, I could smell the water of the bay, watching it rock against the shore and hear it sift onto the sand. A bay is a noun only if the water is dead. When bay is a noun, it is defined by humans, wrapped between its shores and contained by the word. But the verb, wikawagame, to be a bay, releases the water from bondage and lets it live. To be a bay holds the wonder that for this moment the living water has decided to shelter itself between these shores, conversing with cedar roots and a flock of baby mergansers, because it could do otherwise, become a stream or an ocean or a waterfall. And there are verbs for that too. To be a hill, to be a sandy beach, to be a Saturday. All are possible verbs in a world where everything is alive. So the word to be in Potawatomi is Yahweh. Now, I don't know if there's a linguistic connection at all, but when Moses saw the burning bush and spoke with God who was telling him to free his people, Moses said, "Who should I say sent me?" And the response was, "I am who is. Yahweh, I am who is. I am." It is all being. The Potawatomi could teach us how to relate to all the world as a verb. I'm in New York. I set up a Zoom call, 10 o'clock. The person I'm meeting with isn't there. 10:01, I send a text reminder. 10:05, I've left the call because the other person is too late and I have things to do. I need to move on. We're gonna have to reschedule. I'm on Lake Traverse Reservation in South Dakota. I was told to bring my students in the afternoon. I don't know what that means, but it's about 1 o'clock. I've gotten my group of undergrads to a patch of grass near a stream we've been using as our only source of running water. My students lie on the grass for a bit and then, realizing we don't know what will happen or when, they pull out a Frisbee to throw around. There are no cell phones in the 90s, but it wouldn't have mattered because even today there's no cell service on Lake Traverse. So we wait in the grass. I don't know for how long. Darlene comes and she brings her brother and her son. Her son joins the Frisbee game. Her brother sits on the grass. Darlene has a beach chair. She unfolds it and sits down. She starts to tell stories. She talks about the reservation and her history living there. She talks about hiding from people looking to take children to boarding schools, places from which children never really returned. She talks about poverty and alcohol and the struggle of living off this desolate land. A car pulls up, and another, then another. People, also members of the Lakota Nation, join us. They were also told to come in the afternoon. A woman starts walking toward us, and Darlene gets up and sits down next to me on the grass, now facing the chair she vacated. She explains to me that she is 63, but the woman coming is 71, so she gets the chair. And now she tells us stories. We all sit and listen. She speaks very slowly. No one interrupts. Someone named Toad says he's hungry. They agree. It's time for food. We travel a bit down the road to a building made of concrete blocks. We can smell dinner. We go inside where there are folding tables set up with aluminum pans filled with ground buffalo and fry bread. There are bleachers pulled from the walls where people are balancing paper plates, and we're invited to dig in. My colleague tells me that a basket was shown to him in case we have money. There's no charge for dinner, but if we can help, they'd appreciate it. There's already some cash in the basket, and I try to give generously. Jack, my colleague, points out while we're eating that whenever anyone wants to talk to us as a group, they approach him. Darlene tells us that's because he's the oldest in our circle. He adds that he's a man, and she says that's not relevant. Usually the women are in charge, so they'd assume that he would tell me what I need to know to lead the group, but as the oldest, he should always be the first to know. Once we've eaten and talked and even done some dancing, we see people are leaving. It's dark. It's time for us to go. Darlene tells us she'll see us tomorrow. I ask her when we should be ready for her. She tells me that when she arrives, we'll be ready. I spent 3 weeks without looking at a clock. The Lakota can teach us a new way of understanding time. The Trail of Tears started in 1838. The Cherokee, Muskogee, Seminole, and Choctaw nations were moved out of their homes, forced to walk 1,000 miles and relocated on less hospitable land in an attempted genocide. In 1847, the pain from that state-sponsored action was still fresh. They were living in trauma and an ongoing crisis of displacement and grief when they heard the story of the Irish. The British colonized Ireland and forced the Irish into brutal living and working conditions to pay rent to live on their land, the land that had been taken from them. Irish families were existing in windowless huts in holes they dug in bogs and in the sides of mountains. They worked for the British, sometimes growing grain that they were not then allowed to eat. Poor Irish subsisted on potatoes and bits of herring or bacon if they could find it. Living in such squalor meant living on the edge between life and death, maintaining a very careful balance. When a blight meant no more potatoes, thousands and ultimately 1 million people fell victim to starvation. More than 1/8 of the entire Irish population died. In a village in County Mayo on the west coast of Ireland, the people became desperate. They and their children worked all day for the British but had no food and no hope of finding food. One afternoon, the people in the village decided to walk the 20 miles to the nearest town where there were plenty of British and more than enough food. They walked along the cliffs and made their way to find people in their homes and in pubs having their supper. They asked for food but were denied. Over and over, the people turned them away. Still starving, they began the trek home. But on the way, every one of them died. The entire village succumbed to starvation and despair. Some may have been too weak to make their way back. Others may have jumped off the cliffs, knowing death was all that was left anyway. Their village was left untouched, frozen in time for 150 years before anyone found it and started telling their story. When the Choctaw heard the story of the Irish in 1847, they were moved. They knew what it felt like to be part of a systemic effort to erase you and your people. 2 Irish people, part of the 1 million who fled Ireland, found their way to Oklahoma to tell the story and to ask for help. It is hard to imagine a people less able to offer assistance. And yet, they did everything they could. They took up a collection, they sold what they had, they dove into their own reserves and came up with $710, which is about $5,000 today. That money was used to purchase food that could travel, which was sent across the Atlantic and used to feed villagers on the west coast of Ireland. Now, I know this story very well because the man with whom I studied in Ireland was the one who learned of the fate of the village in County Mayo. He started something called the Great Famine March, retracing the steps from the village to the town where the people were rejected. He uses that march as a fundraiser to help people who are starving all over the world. About 10 years after he started it, a member of the Choctaw Nation, Gary Whitedeer, joined him. Actually, Gary had flown over to participate in the walk, and he and Don met and really hit it off. And together, they recovered this story of the gift from one nation to the other, from one desperate people to another. And I know this because I worked for Don and Gary briefly as they were forming this organization, using the story of generosity to inspire people globally to help those who are starving. The Choctaw could teach us a new way of understanding compassion and generosity.
Let's take a deep breath together. We light candles near the end of our service as a response to the holiness we see in the world or that we feel in ourselves. Whether we believe in a higher power or in the power of community, we light the candle to say, yes, I see mystery and majesty in this holy life. You are now invited to speak the names of those people and places most in need of our prayers today. For whom do we pray? For Sandy, Carolyn, Marie,
For Liz and David, Zoe,
Ernest, Marilyn, David. For Brenda, Judy, and Beth. John Claude and his mother. Brittany, Aunt Shirley. Kathy, Lois. All who are with us online are now invited to find a candle and light it, or watch and listen as an act of witness. And if you're with us in this space, you're invited to come up the center aisle now and light a candle and return to your seats.
We light these candles in remembrance of all those people we hold, of all those people we love, of all those people who need us to bear witness. May the Spirit of life blow through them, hold them, and love them. And may we all find peace in this difficult, complicated, and often beautiful world. Going to extinguish our chalice. You'll find the words in your program. Please read them with me. Knowing how quickly the flame of truth may be extinguished, how easily the chalice of fellowship broken, let us be vigilant in faith, keep peace in our hearts, and make care for one another the watchword of our lives together, so our light goes out everywhere into the world. Our light goes out everywhere. Healing and hope are needed. Let us go in peace to love and serve this world and one another. It's good to be with you.